Hi, I'm Dr. David Dobson. Welcome to Conversations. Today, my guest is Corey McPherson. Corey is an entrepreneur, educator, and community advocate. Corey is pursuing a PhD in the sustainability management at the University of Waterloo. His research focuses on leadership and climate change mitigation in cities. We will discuss his PhD today. It's a pleasure to have you on my show, Corey.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Corey, tell me, why were you interested in studying the role of leadership in climate action mitigation?
Yeah, thanks so much. So my interest in leadership's role in climate action came from recognizing that while technical solutions are crucial, they often fall short without the leadership to drive them forward. So climate change is a complex or wicked problem
Mhm.
that spans scientific, social, and political realms, demanding leaders who can push through constraints and mobilize action.
Yeah.
So, in particular, I'm focused on, or I'm interested in rather, the role of sustainability leaders who operate at the forefront of climate action within organizations and municipalities. And so, for me, my leadership focus or my PhD focus will be looking at agency theory. So, I'm exploring how these leaders navigate competing priorities, such as balancing long term sustainability goals with short term organizational demands and
Okay.
overcoming structural and temporal constraints.
Okay. And your PhD research focuses specifically on climate change mitigation in cities. Why cities specifically?
Yeah. So cities are both they're significant contributors
Mm,
to climate change.
okay.
Um, they are critical players in climate
Mm,
solutions as a result of that, and they are responsible for about 70% of global greenhouse gas emissions
mm,
worldwide.
mm,
Um, and local governments often have direct or indirect control over a large portion of these emissions, upwards of around
mm,
50%.
okay.
So my focus on cities is rooted in the understanding that urban areas bring together high population densities,
Mm,
resources, and
mm,
innovation potential, making them
mm,
uniquely positioned to lead impactful climate initiatives.
mm,
So working within a sustainability management framework and
okay.
the Municipal Action Research Partnership at the University
Okay.
of Waterloo, I'm
Mm,
studying how sustainability managers in cities can champion effective climate action despite facing unique challenges, such as
yeah.
limited resources and the added complexity of local, regional, and national political cycles.
Yeah.
So my research emphasizes how urban leaders can be
Yeah.
pivotal in implementing climate
Mm,
solutions locally where change
yeah.
is more manageable and
Yeah.
results are visible.
Yeah.
So for me, like I mentioned before, I'm
Yeah.
particularly interested in identifying how sustainability champions
Mm,
at the local level within
mm,
municipalities
mm,
can leverage their roles, networks, and
mm.
community influence to drive both policy and behavioral change towards sustainability outcomes.
Okay. Very nice. So tell us how you are conducting your PhD research.
Yeah. So as I draft my research proposal, so I'm
Yeah.
designing a mixed method study
Yeah.
to investigate how sustainability managers navigate the
Hmm.
complexities of climate action, but
Yeah.
looking specifically at climate change mitigation.
Mm,
So my methodology will include, so it already does include a systematic literature review, but I'll go
yeah.
even deeper
Hmm.
by exploring an even broader systematic literature review within the parameters of my larger PhD focus
Okay.
which and the one that I previously completed was sort
Mm,
of an initial step
okay.
to identify prevailing themes and gaps
Mm,
in current knowledge.
okay.
Um, yeah, and the review that I just completed
Yeah.
sort of informs my understanding of various leadership constructs and
Okay.
strategies
Okay.
used in urban climate mitigation.
Okay.
So my primary research will involve semi-structured interviews with
Mm,
sustainability leaders in Canadian
mm,
municipalities
mm,
through the Net Zero Action Research Partnership Project
okay.
through Dr. Amelia Clark's lab.
Okay.
Um, and it will explore how Canadian municipalities approach climate action amidst temporal and organizational or structural constraints.
Mm,
I'll also use surveys, for instance, to gather
yeah.
quantitative data
Yeah.
on these leaders' perceptions of their roles,
Okay.
agency motivations, power dynamics, and any other
Okay.
challenges that they might face.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and by examining these leaders' strategies across different urban contexts,
Okay.
my goal is to gain insights into how sustainability champions can effectively balance short-term pressures
Yeah.
and long-term sustainability climate mitigation objectives.
Okay. Very nice. So you have conducted a systematic literature review for your PhD research you just mentioned. can you share a little bit about your literature review?
Certainly, yeah. So my literature review investigates leadership and climate change
Mm,
mitigation at the local level, looking
yeah.
specifically at urban areas
Mm,
such as cities.
mm,
So to conduct this review, I used obviously a systematic approach. And I
yeah.
drew on Scopus as a
Okay.
database, ProQuest, and Web of Science
Yeah.
to select relevant studies on climate leadership within cities.
Yeah.
So I filtered about 500 articles to
Okay.
30,
Okay.
which are peer-reviewed studies
Yeah.
that examine the strategies and obstacles leaders face in urban climate mitigation.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, my thematic analysis highlighted five primary categories of leadership meanings. So I
Mm,
segmented them into people, which is
mm,
looking at influential sustainability champions,
okay.
policy,
Mm,
ideas, collective action, and mobilizing power.
mm,
So these themes represent the diverse ways leaders can mobilize change,
mm,
such as through policy influence,
mm,
collaborative action, and
mm,
community motivation.
mm,
I also looked at various enablers of leadership,
mm,
paramount for
mm,
enacting climate change mitigation at the local level.
yeah.
And most importantly, identify gaps in the literature, such as limited research on leadership and climate change mitigation in smaller
Yeah.
cities
Yeah.
and in regions outside of the global north. So we talk about
Yeah.
the global north and we talk about the
Yeah.
global south. There's a
Okay.
lot of research that's happened in the global north, but not so much in
Mm,
the global south.
right.
So these insights from this literature review, or the
Mm,
systematic literature review,
mm,
are guiding the development of my research proposal
mm,
and will shape my case studies and on municipal sustainability champions at the
yeah.
local level here in Canada.
Yeah. So I want to go back to your literature review. I know we just talked about some of the gap you find. Can you um, explain some more what else you learned from your literature review?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different barriers as well
Yeah.
as enablers
Yeah.
for climate
Yeah.
change leadership. So
Yeah.
one thing I looked at was sort of the role of the mayor as
Okay.
well as the administration at the local
Yeah.
level. So
Yeah.
mayoral influence, for instance, is
Yeah.
a key component
Yeah.
about within cities
Yeah.
and localized urban areas
Mm,
that have the ability to drive
mm,
leadership in climate change mitigation forward.
mm, mm.
That just depends also on the different contexts, the different
Yeah.
regional contexts
Yeah.
that you're operating in. So
Yeah.
one thing that happened with my systematic literature review was
Yeah.
looking at how these cities sort of were organized.
Mm,
So in terms of
okay.
the literature, so I
Yeah.
found that a lot of the systematic literature review
Yeah.
analysis work that I did
Yeah.
centered on a few different regions. So we looked at North
Okay.
America,
Okay.
is sort of how it all sort of played out, looked
Yeah.
at Asia as well as looked at Europe. And
Yeah.
so it just really depends on the different region that
Yeah.
we're looking at and
Yeah.
their different motivations as
Yeah.
well as the different structural barriers that are
Mm,
prevalent within those regions with
yeah.
how they enact climate change mitigation at their local level. So
Yeah.
an example of that would be
Yeah.
looking at China, for instance,
Mm,
where Chinese leaders who are excited about climate change mitigation, sort of at the national level
uh,
and the regional level, can really influence the directive at the local level,
mm,
just based off of their own climate action stances.
mm,
Whereas if you look at something like North America,
yeah.
it's primarily driven by symbolic leadership gestures, which seem to be
Mm,
more oriented within the C40 climate network, for
mm,
instance, or
mm,
other bodies which sort of
mm,
signal that
yeah.
climate change mitigation is an
Yeah.
important topic and one that we
Yeah.
should be taking seriously.
Yeah.
Leadership in climate action, like I had mentioned before, it's like context specific. So their regional
Yeah.
differences mean that
Yeah.
approaches in North American cities may
Yeah.
emphasize like the symbolic or
Yeah.
collective actions, such as public
Yeah.
commitments by local leaders, whereas
Mm,
European cities often adopt
mm,
more of a collaborative or multi-actor
mm,
governance structure.
mm,
I also found that leaders for climate mitigation face numerous challenges, including
mm,
limited
yeah.
resources, time
Yeah.
constraints,
Yeah.
and organizational inertia
Yeah.
as an example. So these
Yeah.
leaders rely on social capital, supportive
Yeah.
governance structures, and policy consistencies to push
Yeah.
climate agendas forward.
Mm,
Another critical finding was the lack of research on leadership in smaller cities in the global south, like I'd mentioned. So despite these areas just growing role in climate action, what we found was that there are significant gaps between this analysis between the global north and the global south. One thing I will say, though, is that the limitations of the study, we're looking at English only translated articles, right? So anything that was produced in another language that wasn't translated into English would be a limitation, just based purely off the fact that those involved were not able to speak anything other than English. So that would be one limitation. But identifying these gaps that I mentioned, they provided a strong foundation for my proposal, so helping me to focus on how sustainability managers overcome barriers to implement meaningful regional tailored climate solutions.
Corey, what is your hope by doing this research? What do you hope to contribute?
So I played around with the idea through my PhD, sort of like trying to understand exactly the position that I was going to go, or the avenue I was going to go with my PhD research. And I flipped back and forth between a multitude of different things, but I sort of landed on this idea of agency theory as sort of informing some of the work around motivations, power dynamics, and structures with that affect leaders. And being able to enact climate action solutions that specifically look at climate change mitigation. So for me, my interest really sort of stems from a lot of the work that I do in teaching. So teaching at like in the Faculty of Management at Royal Roads University, and teaching in the School of Business at Camosun College, as well as teaching in different sustainability contexts within the University of Waterloo. It was one thing where it starts to become very apparent that the management literature and the management theory and the management integration on real world solutions that affect organizations and businesses is like really at the forefront of where we should be looking at this time to start really making impactful climate action solutions. And so cities, like I'd mentioned, are just uniquely positioned because of the influence that they have on not only their own climate, their own corporate emissions, but also looking even at the broader sort of polycentric aspects of things. So looking at different citizen groups, looking at businesses, looking at how sort of collaborations take place and the different actions that they take in order to be able to make meaningful change in their local communities. We sort of require it from all angles. So for me,
for sure.
It really just it really starts on this idea or this notion of sort of this capitalist society. How do we move from a society that's so focused on growth at all costs towards one that still grows but also recognizes the fragility of the environment and keeping greenhouse gas emissions at a level consistent with IPCC and Paris Agreement recommendations?
Do you think there should be some sort of a measurement to measure this series performance to their what steps they're taking to mitigate climate change, so that they know that how they are doing? You know what I mean? Some sort of matrix scales.
So that's actually a really interesting question, because a lot of the work coming out of the Net Zero Action Research Partnership Program, led by Dr. Amelia Clark and a bunch of other affiliate institutions within the program, and a lot of the city groups that we work with, it's interesting because the idea of standardizing tools and measurements and other various different mechanisms that allows a level of standardization across Canada is very much needed at this point in time. So a lot of the work that we're doing is about sort of expanding upon like the PCP tool, for instance, that helps to sort of have a bit of a standardized process and informs Canadian municipal leaders about sort of or sustainability leaders about sort of the things that we're looking to measure and the things that we care about,
Yeah.
to be able to enact sort of effective climate action solutions that work along the mitigation side.
Yeah.
So it's about like looking at our inventories and
Yeah.
making the right decisions. So in that way,
Yeah.
each year we can see meaningful progress
Mm.
over time, and we're not
Yeah.
just sort of stuck in a
Yeah.
state where we're not too sure how to measure the impact of the decisions that we make.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Lots to be done, and definitely in the right
Yeah.
direction. So now, Corey, you have conducted your literature review, you identify your gap. What are the next steps for your PhD research? Or what is next for you?
Yeah. So after finalizing my draft proposal,
Yeah.
I will move on to the proposal defense stage,
Oh, nice.
for me. So yeah, once approved, I'll begin constructing questions for my
Yeah.
survey.
Yeah.
I'll also be conducting in-depth case studies of
Yeah.
sustainability managers, investigating how these leaders manage the competing
Mm,
demands of short-term
mm,
pressures and
mm.
long-term sustainability goals. So I'll
Yeah.
be looking closely at how these managers balance agency-based motivations, power
Mm,
dynamics, and
mm,
structural barriers, sort of to champion climate
mm,
action within their municipalities. So,
mm.
and then professionally, I aim to translate these findings into practical insights that can guide
Yeah.
policymakers
Yeah.
and organizations in supporting climate mitigation efforts at the local
Yeah.
level.
Yeah.
And my goal is to work in academia and or consulting
Yeah.
roles, where I can contribute to developing robust climate actions, solutions and strategies,
Nice.
that are responsive for urban leadership. Yeah, and I hope my research will help foster an environment where
Yeah.
at the local level are empowered to drive meaningful, long-lasting change at the climate change mitigation perspective, or at the space, for cities across Canada and beyond.
Nice. So, Corey, in addition to doing your PhD research, which is full-time job, you are involved in several entrepreneurial and community activities. Can you share some of those work you're doing?
Yeah, so like I'd mentioned, I currently work at the Royal Roads University as
Yeah,
an associate faculty member in the Faculty of Management,
nice.
where I teach project-based learning programs
Mm,
for Bachelor of Business
mm,
Administration students,
yeah, yeah.
as well as teach at the 1 and 200 level for uh, most college
Mm,
students involved in management related and strategy related
okay.
courses.
Mm,
I also do some TA work as well as part of my
okay.
PhD journey at the University of Waterloo, as well as some
Yeah,
research work.
yeah.
But I also have my own food business that I started in
Oh,
2016 called Local Urban Bites.
nice.
So, yeah, and Local Urban Bites, like I'd mentioned, is a Canadian meal kit delivery company that focuses
Mm,
on Lower Vancouver Island
hmm.
for delivering fresh ingredients that basically people put together along with a recipe card and they cook it at home.
Yeah.
And we try to use sort of nature's packaging in a
Mm,
lot of our meal kits. So we don't
mm,
try to wrap everything in plastic, for
mm,
instance. We try to reduce as much food waste by
mm,
providing the exact quantities of ingredients that people require in order to make those
mm.
meals.
Nice.
Um, and yeah, started that in 2016. And then I also started or co-founded
Mm,
QChat Support Association,
hmm.
which is a LGBTQ2S plus peer support program that
Hmm.
operates within the province of BC and
Hmm.
serves BC youth. We received a considerable amount of funding last year,
Mm,
where
nice.
we were able to hire an executive director as well as fund the position of a couple co-op students. We have 20 peer support workers
Mm,
who engage with youth on a daily basis,
nice.
sort of Thursday through to Saturday, or sorry, Saturday through to Thursday, other way around. um, and so, and part of that, basically, at this point in time, we're doing a needs assessment in rural BC. So we're
Yeah.
trying to uncover ways that we can reach a broader audience of
Mm,
youth who
mm,
may not have direct access to a lot of the supports and resources that are prevalent within
mm,
urban centers.
mm,
And so for us, it's about really sort of extending our arm out to those folks who can then
mm,
connect with, folks on our line or different
mm,
community resources that might be nearby to
mm,
help support them along their journey, whatever that may be.
mm. Yeah.
And so that particular program, we classify youth basically up into the age of 30, so it's a pretty
Mm,
broad range,
yeah.
and we get all types of people with different backgrounds
Mm,
calling in looking for some peer support. So, and they all of our peer support workers follow a 6-week training program that we
mm,
co-developed
mm,
um, with different board members that we have as part of our programming,
mm,
that looks at basically active listening, how to engage with different volunteers, providing sort of that empathetic approach, and supportive approach. And then we also have every night we have at least 2 volunteers that sort of work in tandem with one another through a bit of a buddy system that allows them to work together to find resources, suggest resources to the client, and be able to support each other. So yeah, I have a dog, Charlie. So I take Charlie out for his walks all the time, and we go hiking together and just explore basically what Vancouver Island has to offer.
Thank you for joining me today to discuss your work, Corey. I wish you all the best in completing your PhD.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. It was fun being on here. I really appreciate the time you took to do this.